Okay, hi everybody. Are you dealing with sexual addiction, feeling stuck, frustrated, and angry? You'll be amazed how many people are out there feeling the same way. Just a reminder, you are the hero of your own journey, as we are of ours. We see so many people around us going through the same process, getting stuck and frustrated around in their not in their sexuality, but in not getting sexual fulfillment when they want it. So this episode delves into sexual rejection, the frustration that it can cause, what we make it mean about ourselves, um, and some ways to ease the journey and to unpack that and actually find some solutions and some tips in terms of best ways of moving forward rather than getting angry and frustrated, understanding and being able to smooth out that process. Welcome to the Hero's Journey podcast. My name's Joel Sadler. I'm an entrepreneur and internet marketer, and I've helped motivate multiple businesses and owners to scale and achieve their goals. And your co-host today is Mike Harris. He's an entrepreneur and human behavioral expert and coach. He has been speaking and coaching for 17 years and personally helped hundreds of people transform. I'm pleased to say that I'm one of them, and I highly recommend him. So if you want to have deeper conversations, understand yourself further, and have authentic information and conversations, then we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Definitely. For those that are listening, the number of retakes I've done on this intro has been quite a few. So we're here, we've made it. Right. So it's an issue, an age-old issue for obviously for both sexes, for both men and women. We're obviously coming from the male perspective because we are men. And I think it's safe to say that in general, it's probably a bit of a generalization, but I think it's safe to say that men tend to be more sexually driven, I think, than women in my experience. And I think it's just the way we're made up. We have that testosterone flowing through our veins, and, even like a little picture can stimulate sexual interest we were talking about earlier, like billboards, they talk about sex sells. And yes, it appeals to both men and women. But I think, we often, I know for me, often feel like sex on demand, and I think men can roll that way. They talk about potentially a woman, moving through first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear through that sexual, that journey to having sex or being intimate, where men can kind of be, be in fifth gear pretty much straight away kind of thing. So, and that I know that to be true about me. Not saying I don't enjoy, a slower journey as well, but I definitely found that to be true. But I think to provide a bit of context, I think what we really want to talk about today is some of the feelings that come up when being rejected by a partner, and then also what do I make it mean about me, and then what's really going on, and delving through on how to deal with the situations more powerfully than what we might be doing. So yeah, let's start off with that, Mike. And do you want to share a little bit about, or bring some foundation and or share a little bit about some of the feelings that have come up for you in your journey, and then what you were making that rejection, I suppose, or what you saw as rejection mean about yourself. And then I'll share the same, and we can move on to what some looking wider than that into what could really be going on.
hmm Yeah, firstly, I think, it's important to recognize that we are, as human beings, we crave connection.
Mm,
And we crave connection and we crave intimacy, but a lot of people don't realize they're craving intimacy or don't understand what intimacy is or true connection is because they were never modeled or demonstrated it. And so we've all got these different kind of perspectives on
mm,
what connection is, intimacy is, and also what sex is.
mm,
And if we look at sex in its own right, that's a very powerful uh, thing, sex, because it's really taking two people and having them join energetically and physically.
mm,
And so again, there's different levels of what sex can look like, in the past. And I'm sure a lot of people have experienced it that have been sexually active, different types of sex, from a kind of a sexual encounter that's purely physical, and it almost feels like you're using each other to masturbate, where it's like very disconnected. It's a very physical,
mm,
visceral experience in that regard, to then having some kind of sex that's more intimate or has an emotional connection, to then having something that's really deeply, intimately connected energetically on a also spiritual level, where you're consciously going into the union of the two energies coming together, the two souls coming together, where you're truly wanting to meet and see into each other, which is kind of where the term intimacy, into me I see. So
Interesting.
it's actually seeing, it's connecting and allowing yourself an authenticity and vulnerability for you to meet on that level. And so I think it's important that we do kind of look at the different layers of those, of what sex can mean. And I remember an old therapist that I saw many years ago said to me, and it's always stuck, and it's very true. He said, people, a lot of people are fucking for intimacy. So they're craving intimacy, but they don't understand how to get intimacy, and that intimacy actually precedes sex. But what they do is they end up engaging in a shallow form of sex, or more of a purely form of sex, like we talked about before, where it's kind of just utilizing each other from a physical standpoint, hoping that we can create intimacy. Whereas if you have the intimacy first, it actually deepens the sexual experience. And so, yeah, I think it's just important we explain kind of those different types of encounters first up.
100%. And I think also, as we often say, that neither one's necessarily right or wrong. It's just, I suppose, if you're looking for intimacy, I really like your point about, the sexual act is actually, it can be at the end of building that intimacy, and it's an expression of intimacy which you already have, or you've been working on, cultivated. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, totally. And so, and I've experienced all those different facets, and if we just go, okay, again, we don't know what we don't know. And for a long time, for me specifically, and this is very interesting when we start going back through into traumas, childhood traumas, perceptions, attachments, what was modeled to us, what we've kind of perceived sex means by conversations we've had or interactions we've had when we're younger. Many people that have been traumatized sexually through something happening to them during sex, either against their will, or it was willing, but there was some kind of traumatic thing that happened. They got embarrassed, or they felt ashamed, or they felt exposed, or they made fun of, or whatever kind of happened. And I'm sure we've all been in different situations like this. That then can really attach and anchor to the sexual experience. And so if we have a previous trauma that was very strong and it was highly emotive at the time, and obviously we're very vulnerable when we're having sex as well, we're naked, like kind of everything's on stage to be seen. So it's a very powerful experience. And when something happens that is traumatic during that powerful experience, it really wires in there and anchors in there. And so that can then really have a flow on effect for years to come, of not feeling safe to have sex, or that wound coming back up in the nervous system, and you'll kind of experience as a form of bracing. You'll feel your body tense up, or you feel like you can't quite be as vulnerable or authentic. And so therefore it limits your ability to go in and have intimacy, because you're trying to protect yourself with from this wound that happened earlier. So there's many different things that can influence our sexual experiences, that being like a big one.
So Mike, for somebody that might have had a traumatic experience during sex, like you said, and there's all manner of issues that can come up, as you mentioned, what would be something that they could do, or how would you suggest they start to, I suppose, heal that that experience? Like, is it to me it seems quite a deep, as you said, quite a deep, almost scarring kind of thing, that during that really vulnerable time. What would be your tips to help people to kind of work
so
through
first
that?
of all, you've got to be aware of it. You've got to have the ability, to self-reflect and look in the mirror, which, is kind of what we stand for, and is the foundation of the hero's journey, right? Is being able to actually look in the mirror and objectively see yourself, and look in the mirror and acknowledge often what we don't want to see or don't want to acknowledge because it's painful and it brings up these moments of memories. But that self-awareness is the first step. Like, you've got to have the awareness. If you're not aware of it, you can't do anything about it.
Right. So it
But
could be that um someone, for example, they might have been teased about being overweight, for example, or whatever, and so they want to have sex with the lights off,
yep,
for example,
100%.
and they're not necessarily sure that they're not even aware that they're doing that, but subconsciously there's that little drive or that shame, I suppose, that's
Totally.
been like hammered into them. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, totally. Like,
Right.
and I'll share some
Mm,
examples, real life
mm,
ones.
mm, mm, mm,
For example, there's someone that I had known that wasn't into oral sex at all,
mm,
and they then were very vocal about that, in front of one of their children as well. And for example, that child now has this adversity and this kind of dislike towards the idea of oral sex because
right.
their mother would speak about it and talk about how they didn't like it. And so just by that programming subconsciously, by proxy, they've now adapted or adopted the same kind of dislike to it. And so
Mm,
as parents, a lot of what we say and do and demonstrate has a major impact on us, and how we then play these pieces out. So that's
mm,
one example. Another example for, you brought up a great one about the weight.
mm,
A lot of people, so if someone perceived they had, which I've, again, heard all these things I'm about to share with you, but if we had, like, someone was ashamed of their stomach, they thought they had a fat stomach or whatever, male or female, they
mm,
exactly wouldn't want the lights on if their thighs were big, or if they thought that they had, genitalia that they were ashamed of, or,
mm, mm,
or just the shame, the idea, because again, through culture, religion, all these different things, we have all these
mm,
projections put us
mm,
onto us, and a lot of these
mm,
religions and constructs make sex wrong or bad, and there's a lot of
mm,
shame and guilt attached to it. And so again, if
mm,
you're feeling shame and guilt, you don't really
mm.
want to be seen in all
Oh, yeah. I
lights.
mean,
You kind of want to hide away.
yeah, my weight, I've been like, for those that know me, like, hard out into CrossFitting, lean and ripped, sort of, to now, like, where I'm carrying a bit of weight, and I sort of fluctuate all over the place depending on the year and what's going on. Um, but if I am in this space where I have a bit of extra tummy weight carrying, I'm very conscious of that.
Yeah,
When it comes to having sex, with my
yeah,
wife, I'm kind of like, oh, I don't sort of turn the lights off, but I am aware of it, but then I can sort of move on. But if she turned around and pointed it out, and it would definitely be embarrassing. And so, I think what I'm saying is, I think even without a traumatic event, we're conscious because of what the paradigm society forces us on
totally.
us. But if someone then points it out or it's exaggerated, it actually really hurts and can scar. So,
Yeah,
mm,
that's what I'm saying with this too. Like,
mm,
there's so many
mm,
facets, there's so many
yeah,
things that can affect our association to sex, how we perceive we show up during sex, and what we want to be seen or not seen doing.
mm,
Also, fetishes and things like that, where you get
mm,
some people that really go into the fetish realm, because there was some form of association around that particular thing happening that created a fetish.
mm,
There could be a real painful trauma that was attached to some sexual experience that then you've now associated pain to orgasming. And so
right,
that's when you get people, because they've had pain when they were younger during some experience,
mm,
they've now gone, okay, pain equals orgasm. And so they want to be, you know, hurt, or you go into your BDSM where there's, the bondage and discipline, and you start going down that realm. It's because something happened younger, again, where there was just that association or coupling of pain and orgasm, or pain and sex.
right,
So there's so many facets to what can happen. Something that happened for me when I was younger, was one of my first girlfriends had been sexually abused by her father's friend. And I was like 17 at the time, and I didn't understand initially. But when we would go to engage and starting to get sexual,
mm,
all of a sudden she'd push back, she'd reject me, she'd physically push me away, she'd start swearing at me and cursing at me and calling me names. And here I was as a 17-year-old going,
mm,
that I couldn't make sense of it. I was like, what the heck's going on? This is really
mm,
weird.
mm,
That was really traumatizing for me. And so then I definitely know that had a big impact on me then, for a period of time, wanting, probably later on, initiate in the fear of being rejected, or in the
Yeah,
fear
huge.
of
Mm,
having someone hurl abuse at me, or feeling like I'm doing something wrong.
mm,
I later discovered and addressed it with my girlfriend at the time that, yeah, she'd been sexually abused. And so I could make sense of it, which
mm,
then helped me understand and be okay with it. Because, initially, before I understood why, and the understanding of why is really crucial, because
heck
once we
yeah.
have understanding, we can make sense of it. If we can make sense of it, we don't necessarily have to create the same attachments that we would
Mm,
have created otherwise, and made
mm,
it mean it was something wrong about us. And it was because that's what I did initially.
yeah.
But when I understood, okay, she's been sexually abused. Oh, right. So when I come to her and initiate something or start touching her, that anchors back to, or brings back, that
Mm,
attachment of what this person did that she didn't want to do to her.
mm,
And all of a sudden she's reliving that experience, and I'm that person she's perceiving that did it to her, and she
mm,
wants to push me away. And so
mm,
it wasn't just a bracing she did, she had a very much a fight or flight response. And
mm,
so that's because of the interaction that she had, where this person did the stuff against her will when she was younger. Her nervous system is wired now to respond like that, because it's trying to keep her safe. And
mm,
so consciously, she would know that I'm not the one that did it, and I'm not the perpetrator. But subconsciously, and with her nervous system, it just overruled it and overrun it, because it was just so raw.
mm.
So
Survival mode sort of thing. Mm,
yeah, and so when
mm,
you look at that there, you can see, you talked about earlier, well, how do we
mm,
make those things mean? What do we make them mean about us? Well, initially I was like, well, I made that mean there was something wrong with me, like she's
mm,
rejecting me.
mm,
So after finding out, it was because of what happened, I could think, oh, okay, it's not me. There's nothing wrong with me.
mm.
She's been a victim of someone perpetrating on her,
Yeah.
so it made complete sense, and it kind of helped release me from some of those attachments I'd started to try and make. But in
Mm,
saying that, I had that wired into my nervous system too, and had to do some work around that if I initiate, I'm going to potentially get rejected. And so there was that kind of piece for me too, that was trying to protect
mm,
myself from being
mm.
rejected as well.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Wow. It's so many layers there. I just want to
Yeah.
take a moment to, because we've talked about the sexual abuse element there. If anyone's listening and that has come up for them, do reach out for help. I'll put a couple of links down below if anyone needs someone to talk to. If this has brought up a whole lot of grief and pain, it's really important that you get that off your chest and talk to someone.
Yeah.
Reach out to Mike, but I'll also put a couple of other specialist sort of services there around the sexual abuse side of things.
Just on that too, man,
Um,
it's a good thing you
mm,
bring that up. We're talking about
yeah,
this. It is a touchy subject, and it's
mm,
it's a subject that affects a lot of people in regards to the trauma aspect or abuse aspect.
yeah,
And it's important to realize, and it's easy to say, but is to try not to feel the shame, like to access. Yes, there's going to be some shame, and there's going to be some perhaps guilt sometimes, but it's to lean into that and to know that you can do something about it. And
mm,
often we will try and run and disassociate from that, but it doesn't really solve anything, because the subconscious stores everything,
mm,
and so does the nervous system. So even though you may have tried to bury it and disassociate from it, you'll find it is
mm,
still running you. It's just running you subconsciously. And so I invite you to look in and lean into those parts that are painful, and do something about it if you wish to evolve through it. And that there are many people out there that can help you with this type of thing as well, and you don't have to do it on your own. And can be hard to do on your own sometimes. So
mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you know, for me, some of the most challenging or worst times of my life and or situations that have come up or happened have been where the most growth has come from. So yeah, I agree with that. Encourage anyone to, seek professional help, like someone
Mhm.
like Mike, who's qualified to guide you through a process of healing. Um, otherwise it'll just follow you around.
Yeah. So
Um,
if we look at it from that's that we've gone down that uh
mm,
pathway of looking at the trauma aspect that can be attached, and then
yeah,
if we also then sort of step out of that part and then just go, okay, let's just say that, and we all have certain elements of different levels of what we would perceive trauma around it, right?
mm,
Rejection, and like
mm.
even rejection's trauma, and it's can
Well,
be
well, I was just going to
traumatic in
say,
its own sense.
we had a piece there to, what do we make it mean about me when I was rejected, when we were rejected sexually?
Hmm.
You had a great example there where you literally were physically rejected.
Yeah.
So as you said, what did you make that? What did that you make that mean about you for a while there? It must have been
Oh, when I was young, yeah,
extremely
when it
challenging.
happened and
Yeah.
I was young, I was
Mm.
like, I thought something was wrong with me. Like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the question. And as a young person at 17,
Yeah.
I was really lucky because my mum taught sex education and stuff in school. And so we had a
Mm.
really open dialogue around all this, whereas a lot of
Nice.
kids or parents, kids relationships, they don't have quite the same open dialogue. And
Yeah.
therefore, if the parents, for example, are shamed around sex and they're very conservative and don't want to talk about it, then obviously there's no open conversations that happen for the kids. And so therefore the kids end up taking their information and programming from, it could be porn, it could be like
Mm.
movies, it could be wherever, because they haven't been given any education or understanding from the people that are closest to them that have brought them up. So they seek consciously externally to get information on sex, or even not even consciously, subconsciously programmed
Mm.
externally through movies, through
Mm.
porn, through stuff that just becomes, oh, this is what this means, this is what sex is. And so
Mm.
if those conversations aren't had, like I was lucky to have with my mum and dad,
Mm.
I kind of figured it out myself. And I was
Mm.
talking to mum one day and I said, I wonder if this has happened to her. And
Mm.
I asked her and I said, hey, have you been sexually abused? And she broke down in tears and said, yes. And I was the first person she had told. So, um, once I had done that,
Wow.
and I feel very grateful that I'd had the insight and just those conversations and upbringing, that I could kind of access that knowledge to do that, because it made such a big difference for me finding out,
Mm.
and for her too, that it kind of released some of the hold that it was having, because she could kind of offload it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So
Wow. What a powerful example. Gosh.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean for me, well, it sort of seems to pale in comparison, but I'm sort of bringing it back to just
Yeah, don't
sort of
minimize. It's
everyday.
important not to minimize your
Yeah, but you know what I
experience
mean?
though
Like,
too, to
yeah,
someone else's, you know?
yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. So bringing it back to everyday, I suppose married life, for me, obviously I've made advances before and been rejected,
Yeah.
and for me, I made it mean about me that I wasn't important enough. And so the part that I've really been learning is about life is how to respond versus react. And so my reaction or trigger that would trigger in me would be stuff from my childhood where I felt not important enough
Yeah.
to my dad or mum or whatever. That's obviously another piece, but I won't go into all the detail there. And so that was playing out, that trigger was playing out when my wife would say, no, I'm too tired,
Yeah.
or whatever it was. I can't even think
Yeah. Fill
specifics
in
and
the
detail,
blank,
fill
right?
in the
Like,
blank.
yeah.
But like it would hurt, and for me I'd get angry, frustrated, and then I'd start like blaming. I'd be like, what? Like I do all these things and I do this and this, and start to kind of like not say it, but I'd be thinking it, and start festering away.
Yeah.
Um and I
Yeah, so
think
if we look at that,
mm,
just sort of jump in there, like you
yeah,
said,
yeah.
so and let's just go to that premise now, and where it's just, between husband and wife or partner.
Mm,
Um, and now you can understand this, there for each of us individually, for each person, they've got their unique lens, experiences,
mm,
beliefs, traumas, being part of the experiences or whatever. All when they come into the scenario, they're all coming, each of us individually are coming in with our own lens at looking at this, and
mm,
meanings and attachments. And so it's really important to understand yourself first, to understand
yeah,
what your triggers are and pieces are, and also understand what's happening for your partner as well, because there's two of you there, each with different viewpoints completely. And so
yeah,
when we get rejected, like you
yeah.
said, that if your partner had said, hey, I'm tired, and you'd been all geared up for it, and often too we'll create these expectations, and we'll start to play out how we want to see the scenario go. Okay,
Mm.
well, maybe I'll get some sex
Yeah.
tonight, and I'll try this, I'll initiate here, I'll do this, and we kind of map it out, and then boom, oh no, I'm too tired, or oh, I can't, or whatever.
Yeah, or the
Um,
worst one that would get me is like if it was like no, because I'm say too tired or whatever, but
mm,
then she'd go and do something else,
mm,
and I'd be like, what?
yeah,
And that would really trigger me, the frustration more, you know.
yeah,
And that not good enough, I would then think, well, I'm not good enough on your hierarchy of things you want to do,
yeah,
you know. And so that you can probably still feel a bit of the emotion there now. Like it's a working piece
yeah.
of
We're all a work in
progress for me, you know.
progress, totally. Well, like
But
no
what?
one likes reject. Like, let's just be straight up. I don't think there's
Yeah,
many people. Some will say, well, they've learned to deal with it and they've learned to accept it and that, but no one really
yeah,
likes rejection. And
no,
yes, you can learn to change your associations to it, and you can not take it personally, but that does take work, and it's important to
yeah,
honor those parts inside us that
definitely,
were younger parts that did have issues with being rejected, and to first
yeah,
acknowledge and be okay with the fact that, hey, and again, this is where it's coming home to self and
yeah.
making sure that
Tell
you
us
know that
about that.
it's,
The soap.
yeah, that
Give
it's
us a
that
yeah,
you
yeah,
understand it's safe to feel what you're feeling.
mm,
It's okay to feel what you're feeling.
mm,
Allow yourself to feel it and give yourself permission to feel it fully, to
mm,
allow it to come up and acknowledge it, and then allow it to move through your system, through your nervous system.
mm.
And when the rejection comes up, for example, like the meaning you attached it to it, which we uncovered was something that happened when you were
Mm,
younger, is that I'm just not important. And it was really about your parents. It wasn't
mm,
just about what was happening with your partner at the time, but it just
mm,
anchors back in the nervous system, that part about not being important. So that comes up, and all of a
mm,
sudden you're like
mm,
a younger version of yourself in the situation
mm.
where you've made this meaning to something that's happened,
Yeah.
and you get stuck in that place. And so
Mm,
one of the first things you want to do is go, well, okay, hang on, what's this part that's coming up inside me? How old do I feel? What does this part need right now? Oh, I just need some love and reassurance and validation. Okay, so
mm,
you then have to give that to yourself first. You need to repair with yourself and give yourself what it is that this younger part needs.
mm,
So hang on a second, wait, okay, I just need some love. I just need to acknowledge myself. I need to acknowledge this younger part,
mm.
and sit with that, and then make sense of
Yeah.
what's happening for your partner potentially. Because
Mm, mm,
what we do as soon as we go into that place of, oh, I'm
mm,
just not important enough, that's
mm.
actually all about you. And so we end up projecting our own wounds and traumas
Yeah. Yeah.
into the situation, making it mean all of that.
And it's
For your
very
partner, it could be
one-sided.
that they've just had a really long,
Yeah.
stressful day.
Yeah, exactly.
They're
Yeah.
tired.
Yeah.
They haven't even been thinking about sex, but because you have been for the
Mm,
last 20 minutes going, oh
mm,
yeah,
mm, mm.
I'm up for some sex tonight.
Yeah.
In their view of the world, they've been running around looking after the kids or doing dishes or whatever it is. And that's not even been in the forefront of their mind. All of a
Yeah.
sudden you come in and you're like, oh, you try to initiate something physically or verbally, and they're
Yeah.
like, oh no, I'm not up for it. That's when you go into your stuff, and we discount what's actually happened for them. And so
Yeah.
if you go, okay,
That
well,
that that part's huge, is just getting the context, because the context and bringing a bit of perspective to it. Because I think, I don't know about you and whether I'm assuming it's normal behavior, but all I know is about my experience and my emotions when I, am triggered
yeah,
and react internally in my mind. I'm not always thinking straight, as in
totally,
like,
because we're triggered.
yeah, I'm just like in this channel, like rah, 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 you know.
Yeah.
But then as soon as I get a perspective and go, well, actually, hang on, like I know what it's like when I've had a busy day or
Mm,
a bad day or I'm in my head. And
yeah.
and we've talked about, generally for a woman to feel, we can move into this piece in a minute, but to feel safe and comfortable and in her own self to have sex and be in that vulnerable state, she needs to be out of her head in that
Hmm.
go, go, go mum mode or work mode or whatever, and just in relaxed woman mode,
Yeah.
sort of thing. The same for us,
Totally.
so yeah, that brings a lot of context. It helped me to really just kind of navigate situations,
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
an
So if you can
important
sit
thing
there and go,
to
okay, hang on a sec, why does it make sense that they're not into wanting to do this right now?
mm,
And they've just said they're tired, and you sit and reflect and go, okay, why does this make sense? Oh, they've been running around looking after the kids. They've been doing dishes. Oh, they're tired.
yeah,
It might be that they're at a particular time of the month that they're just not feeling sexually
mm,
aroused. They may be feeling bloated. They may be feeling unattractive. They may have like had an experience that day where they've like thought themselves that they've put some weight on and they're not feeling sexy, or could be
Mm.
so many different things. It's really important that we get in to understand that our partners situation and what's happening for them, so that we don't just, as I said before, project our own experience and our own old wounding or trauma, or
Mm.
the perceptions and attachments of being rejected, which
Mm.
is our stuff, into that and making it mean that they've done something to us. It's not.
Yeah.
It's that
No,
we've been triggered of something
exactly.
that's older in us, and we're not
Yeah.
looking at it as what's going on for them too. So
Yeah.
that part's really important, to create those distinctions and separations. And
Heck
what a
yeah.
lot of people don't do is they don't do that. They
Yeah.
just sit in the blame game and you rejected me, and they get really hurt and they'll shut down. And this is where then they'll
Mm.
revert back. As you talked about before, when it happens to you, you're kind of not thinking clearly sometimes,
Mm.
because when we're triggered and we go into fight or flight, our prefrontal cortex shuts down. We're not thinking
Mm.
rationally,
Mm.
and we're in survival mode, and we're either
Yeah.
trying to get out of there, fight, fawn, freeze. We've got all these different responses we're trying to
Mm.
do
Mm.
that are just survival mechanisms. And so when it's there, it is tough to be logical, rational, and go
Mm.
through. And the way that you expand your nervous system is to basically honor those parts of you first, and allow yourself to see them and feel them, and then we integrate those parts, which is kind of some of the work that I do,
Yeah.
where it brings them home instead of making them these painful shadows that we don't want to deal with or don't want to see. So
Yeah.
um yeah, it's a really interesting one, but as a whole, as a generalization, we are generally looking outside of us instead of looking inside of us,
Mm.
of what's actually going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then sort of, heading towards wrapping it up, the last part that I think is really important, that was really helpful for me as well, was um a bit of strategy and thinking about what actually do I want to be in the relationship. Like, it's funny, like, oh, like, in business, I deploy strategy and thinking time and processes and investing in other areas of my life. But like, to
Yeah.
kind of just expect sex like that without any strategy or thinking or context or
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
investment is a
Yeah.
bit kind of naive, So,
Yeah.
so what I've really been learning as well, well, I mean, I know that already, but what I'm relearning, I suppose, is that actually, I want to lead by being that masculine, it would be authentic masculinity, So what does it actually mean? Like, I want to, figure out that, when is the best time for sex? How do I make my wife feel safe, secure? Um, and also I think a point that you made was a distinction between, do I actually just want to cuddle here and be connected,
Yeah.
which might lead to sex or might not, or do I actually want sex or both? And I
Yeah.
think there's quite a distinction, because I know for a fact that I'm not sometimes very clear to her about what I actually want right now.
Yeah.
And if I,
And you
roll
may
over
not
to
be
give her a
clear
cuddle
because
at
there's a
11
part of
o'clock.
you that doesn't want to be rejected. So you're not actually being totally forthcoming, because there's a part of you going, oh, what if I am clear and she doesn't
Yeah,
want
well, I
it? And
mean,
then,
if it's late at night, like 11 o'clock, and I roll over and give her a cuddle or whatever, like that sort of thing. I mean, she doesn't know. It's like, oh, is he wanting to have sex now? I've just fallen asleep, or is he just being nice and having a cuddle? So I think it's nice to kind of just, communicate, sort of thing, what I'm looking for or looking to achieve, I suppose, out of it.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think, just on that as well, is
Mm.
that, and you made the point that you deploy strategies in business and investing and stuff. That's, and I think we had this chat. It's like, well, how many people are setting up date time, especially if you have kids, if
Mm.
you've got a
Mm.
family and you've got children, like everything changes. Your time is no longer your time. You've got little ones that are demanding your time and taking energy and so forth. And sometimes after dealing with children at the end of the day, kind of some of the last thing you feel like is doing that,
Mm.
because you've just been so flat out. And so, we diarize things for business, we diarize things for appointments or sports or whatever, but we're not often diarizing date nights or
Mm.
times together and asking our partners, like, what do you want? Like, how do you want to connect? How do you want
Mm.
to have date night? What does date night look like to you? And actually prioritizing these times to create an environment and create a energy where it is safe for her to be in her body and for you to be in your masculine, her be in her feminine, where you
Mm,
can connect like that, or you had the ability to have some intimacy first over dinner or whatever you choose to do, so that you know that this time is carved out for us. And when we
mm,
feel connected to someone and we feel appreciated and we feel seen and validated, both men
mm,
and women,
mm,
then we feel we want to open to that person. We want to be authentic. We want to be connected to them. And so
mm,
a lot of people are missing those really important parts. And as you said, they're just like in their own head creating these expectations, but having not really set the groundwork or created the right environment to meet the expectation that they have. And then when they go ahead and just launch into it
mm,
without thinking about all of that or being aware of it, and then they get the pushback,
mm.
they don't understand, well, you've just rejected me. And it's just this kind of simple thing, I've been rejected. And
Yeah.
in previous relationships as well, and this comes down to different wounds again from attachments to our parents. When I got rejected, it was like I just felt really emasculated, and
Mm,
I would feel really lacking of worth, and what's wrong with me. That whole piece would come up,
mm.
and I would get back. I remember a while back, I'd even get whiny. I'd oh, go on, oh, what's wrong? And you kind of get
Yeah,
into
yeah.
this moany, whiny place,
Yeah,
and I don't care about
yeah,
talking about that now, but it was
yeah, yeah.
because and when I was in it, I was in it. I just didn't know
Yeah,
that
yeah. That's what it
I
is.
was
Yeah.
I knew I was responding like that, but I didn't know why.
Mm,
And it was because I just really struggled with feeling like I was being rejected
mm.
by the woman, and the woman essentially represented the mother figure and feeling rejected from the mother.
Right.
Because for boys, the mother is the first female that we kind of have attachment to, and same for women with men. And
Mm,
so that's why you'll hear these cliches and so forth of mummy issues or daddy issues, these things. But literally, the attachments we've learnt to our parents often will play out as attachments and how we show up in our sexual encounters. And so I would then really question and kind of get whiny as well. Why don't you want to have sex, instead of having really come home to myself and understood these parts in myself, so I could kind of reparent those younger parts that felt really
mm,
rejected and
mm,
integrate those pieces into me. Once I did that, I didn't show up the same way any longer. I see myself more objectively. I understood it. And so if I got declined, I didn't make it mean all those old things that were wired in me. I
mm,
could then look at it like, okay, that my partner's not wanting sex at the moment, and that's okay. It doesn't
mm,
mean that
mm.
I'm XYZ.
No, and then I can still connect by maybe offering her a massage or something. Okay, so she's tired of,
At
you
that
know, what I mean,
point, if you want to,
like I think that's the place that I'm aiming to get to, or I'm, well, working on, is to the point where I can respond and just go, okay, that's fine, sort of thing, and just move on. Or go, oh, actually, oh, you're really tired, and yeah, have had a hard day. Is everything okay? And then just support,
yeah,
and or lead to a massage or a cuddle or whatever, or a cup of tea or whatever, it might be.
yeah,
To move to more of that powerful masculine space, as opposed to, as you mentioned, that whining little boy,
yeah, the wounded little
the
boy.
wounded little boy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Or it could be the wounded little girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like, if at that point the person says no, and you're able to catch yourself because you've got the awareness and
Mm,
you've connected to that part of you and you understand that part, you then broaden the gap between. So if you look at like stimulus being rejected,
mm,
and then before we're aware of that part and it's out in our subconscious and it's buried, there's like reaction. It's like stimulus, I got rejected, reaction, boom,
mm,
boom. It's just like
mm.
there's no gap in between. When you start to understand and you do the work on it and you start to have compassion for that part of yourself and you get to integrate that part
Yeah.
and not make it wrong, but understand it and start to heal it. Now, when you get the stimulus, you get the rejection, there's a small space that you've got where this space, you can kind of observe yourself
Mm,
objectively,
mm.
and you choose now how you want to act
Nice.
rather
Yeah.
than just reacting. And this
Mm,
is how we all kind of start out when we're uncovering these blind spots and these things. There is no space. As we start to uncover it and do the work around it, we kind of expand our nervous system to handle it. And now we have this gap, and we can
mm,
choose to respond consciously versus responding subconsciously through a wound, a trauma, a
mm,
survival mechanism that just comes out.
mm. I like it. I like it.
And then just to add before we finish up on that, at that point, as the devotional masculine leader, then you want to lead your woman at that point and be supportive and be nurturing in that. And for example, if you ask yourself, what is it I'm really wanting right now? If it is just to be connected to her, or to let her know you love her, or to have some intimacy, you can say, hey babe, that's fine, no problem. I really would love to connect with you. Can we have some cuddles? Can I give you a massage? Is there something I can do for you? And just to show them that, because when we get rejected and we go into our wound, it's very emasculating, and it's a real turn off for them as well. So again, it's up to us to govern ourselves and repair with ourselves first, and then lead her by showing her too that you still care, that you want to disconnect with her, and that you are validating her needs in that moment.
I like that. And it maintains your state of masculinity and perceived state of masculinity as well, rather than being emasculating yourself with the negative reaction to that. You maintain that posture, I suppose, or that space.
Yeah. And let's be honest, all of us at some point in time have probably reacted and responded in a way that was really disempowering, but we just in that moment, at that time, we just didn't have any other resources other than to respond that way, and which is okay. Again, it's, I look at all of this journey of life and all these pieces and these layers as just a continual process of growth and evolution. And if you approach it that way and realize that you're human and it's normal to have these responses, but those responses and those triggers are invitations and doorways into understand yourself further and to go deeper and to heal these pieces, then you kind of change the whole way you look at it. You don't have the same shame around it. You can approach it in a much different way, where you're compassionate to yourself and you're actually looking at yourself as a being that's evolving, and that's what we're here for. So you don't make yourself wrong for it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
All right, Mike. On that note, thanks so much for today.
Awesome.
Remember to subscribe if you're interested in these authentic conversations. Also, the link to Mike's website will be below as well. So do reach out if you want help or coaching or discussion on any of the topics discussed today. Brilliant. See you next time.